we're very limited in not just the way that we can communicate, but the way we think.
I couldn't agree more. I think our lack of vocabulary is making us as a society very dumb.
Why do you think it's so important to improve yourself?
I don't think everything I do goes towards improving myself, but more so exploring out of curiosity.
Welcome to the show. Thank you for taking part in this immersive listening experience. A meaningful existence is a moving target that, no matter how close, will always be out of reach. We hope this message finds you with an outstretched hand. As we attempt to uncover complex truths, remember, life's toughest questions can be answered if we all just focus on one thing: being good people.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to Good People, episode 51. Today, I was joined by Brock Covington. He is a business owner, an ultra runner, an athlete, and a reading and literature connoisseur. In today's episode, I talked with Brock about his journey over the last couple of years, from opening and selling a gym, all of the ultra marathon and athletic goals that he has set and completed for himself, his love of philosophy and literature, and so much more. If you guys are listening on YouTube, before we begin, please head down and like, comment, and subscribe, and turn on our notifications so you don't miss our weekly uploads. Enjoy the show. Well, Brock, man, I appreciate you coming on the show. It's nice to finally meet you. I'm excited to get to know you a little bit better over the course of our conversation.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. I believe you talked to a mutual friend of our, Gage, in the past.
Yep.
So I'm always down to chat and looking forward to whatever we get into.
Yeah, I followed you for a good while now on Instagram, and we're from very similar areas. I'm like 2 hours north of where you grew up. I grew up in Winchester, Virginia.
Okay.
And did you grow up in Richmond?
Yeah, I grew up in Richmond. Is Winchester near Charlottesville? That's the only
Winchester
northern
is like the
kinda...
tip. It's not Northern Virginia, but it's like the tip on the edge of Virginia and West Virginia. It would be like
so
just outside Nova.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
Gotcha.
like if I said I'm from Nova, people from Nova would be pissed.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Gotcha.
but anyways, I followed you for a good while, and
Yeah.
I found Gage via your podcast, and I reached out to him, and he was excellent guest, and I enjoyed talking to him.
Oh yeah, well, sweet.
Well, dude, give me the 30,000 foot view of Brock Covington. What are all the things you got your hands on?
Probably more things than I should. And one thing I've thought about is that kind of classic question of what do you do, or that 30,000 foot view question. I almost feel like it's the place you have to start with someone new, someone you haven't met before. But it's almost like the least interesting view to take, of course, because once you get into like the nuance elements of the eccentricities about somebody, that's where the fun stuff comes out. But I do a bunch of things. So I've owned some different businesses. I currently, a primary business I do that's not as like flashy that I mention on podcasts, but don't promote because the content isn't crazy. But I'm a video editor for real estate agents across the country. So I've managed that business basically freelance for about 5 years now. Through doing that, through the past few years, I've also opened up a fitness facility outside of Richmond, Virginia, and Ashland, Virginia, if you're familiar with that. Ran that for 2 years. Good success with that. My wife and I wanted to move to Colorado, change of scenery. We're young. Now's the time to try and make some of these, big moves and explore a little bit. And so sold the gym from there since then. And kind of over the past few years anyway, been doing a lot of content creation as well. So working with different brands, paid ad deals, ambassador stuff, just general content creation, whether it's YouTube, Instagram, podcasts, all of that. And then lately, in the past year, also started another business with a friend of mine, Jeremy Miller. We started Switchback, which is a running brand that's centered around our electrolyte product. But we also offer a host of different gear, whether it's hats, shirts, different kind of apparel. We want to make a big emphasis around the community and the events that we can put on and make our impact through that rather than just the monotony of products. And other than that, I dabble in more things than I should as far as hobby skills, reading, writing when I make the time for it, all of that.
Just from an outside perspective, I feel like one of the reasons why I'm drawn to your content and I'm excited to have this conversation is because similarly, I feel like I'm trying to pull myself in so many different directions all the time. Like we have very similar fitness hobbies. You know, I'm a fitness coach as a profession. I've
Hmm.
done ultra marathons. I'm a blue belt in jiu-jitsu. Uh, Pretty much anything that revolves like physical capacity, I'm interested in either doing it or learning more about it. And then add on top of that stuff like the books and the literature and the writing.
Hmm.
And that specifically, I think, is the reason why I want to have this conversation. And I appreciate your sort of comment on the 30,000 foot view question, because you know, hopefully we can kind of like skip right through all that stuff. And I'm very excited to talk to you about the more introspective, philosophical, because that's the stuff that makes the person. And I think no
Hmm.
matter, I might be putting words into your mouth, but I think you would agree with this statement, because this is how I view it. No matter what I try to do, the purpose is generally always improve the self, or you know, involve myself within a community of people. And just overall, you know, that's why I named the show Good People. It's because I think
Hmm.
good people live good lives. And whether it's fitness or, you know, solving a Rubik's Cube or reading, you can use anything to improve yourself. And it seems like you feel the same way.
Yeah, I think what you're hitting on there is letting curiosity and passion and this desire for learning kind of lead the self in various directions. And I think if you lead with that kind of childlike mindset, and search for the crux of people rather than the utility of people, like what they can do for you, or look at them as some kind of means to some financial end, or objective vanity metric, or whatever it could be. I think you end up improving the self as a function of that.
Mm. Let's start by talking a little bit about Iron Built. Something that I admire about the journey and I'm excited to learn more about is I'm the it's how old are you, by the way?
24.
24. Yeah. So I'm 23, right? We're like the same. We kind of probably had the same upbringing, like introduction to social media relatively early in the teenage years. We're
Hmm.
kind of the first of the people that potentially aspired to have YouTube channels and like be a person of influence, or whatever the case may be. And because of that, I feel like something I admire about you is it seems like you're good at taking the scary leap. Like the idea of owning a gym is awesome to me, but if I were to actually come down to do it, there's a lot of fear that I have about taking that jump. And it sounds like
Yeah.
you started Iron Built from a relatively early age. So tell me a little bit about that process. You know, what was like the origin story of opening the doors for the gym?
Yeah, honestly, every time I, ponder on this myself, or I get asked a question around this, it's kind of like more enlightening for myself. So I appreciate you kind of asking it. It's so the gym origin. It's kind of like most people. I didn't even reference my background in my 30,000 foot view. I missed a few feet, I guess, because I didn't mention the lifting and the running aspect that's been at the core of my life for about a decade. But So I got into bodybuilding in high school, loved it. It was an opportunity for me to lose weight, improve my physique, build self confidence, discipline, all those things that come with it. And like most people who fall into lifting, they're like, man, this would be sweet if I could own my own gym. That's the dream. You see a few people do it, and you're like, man, that would be awesome. I could, create a bodybuilding, powerlifting kind of space, a place for like real, like niche lifters. And there's a market for it. I know it. And so many people at these commercial gyms I go to would like be down for it. So it was always a goal I had. And I remember plenty of old heads at the gym would come up and be like, oh yeah, I remember I wanted to start a gym one day. And so it would always be one of those conversations where it was like, yeah, great idea, kid, but like you're not actually going to do it, or it's not really going to work out. And I always had the attitude of, I can be different, right? And I think we all tell ourselves that, like we all have a little bit of that um, narcissism where we think, okay, we have something special in us, right? But I just felt like I was willing and young enough and putting in the work to take the leap. And so I started saving money for it. So heading into college, I had already been working, like I think like 16 to 22 16 to 20 hours a week throughout high school. A lot of that went towards paying off my car that I had. And after that, heading into college, I went to VCU for 2 years. I was doing a couple things. So I ended up doing a lot more freelance video editing work, which is carried into, still what I do today, just on a much larger scale today. So I was making some side money doing freelance work as a video editor. And then at the same time as personal training, variety of clients at the university gym, saving, doing what I could. And once the pandemic arrived, so I'd maybe been saving for about like a year and a half, and the pandemic arrived. I noticed there was like this opportunity. It was like a break. It was I think a shift for a lot of people that sometimes for some spiraled negatively, and for other people it was the break they needed, or the like momentary lapse to assess themselves and where they want to go. It was like this moment of purgatory where they could figure out if they're going up, down, around, which direction path they want to go. And for me, this was the moment where I said, okay, let's start looking at properties. And that was, I guess, the genesis of it, and why it maybe happened a little bit sooner than it would have. Because I think reflecting back, it's not like I had, the chutzpah to just go for it. And I always knew I was going to be successful with it. It wasn't that at all. I think I was just at a place where I didn't have too much to lose. I didn't have some kind of corporate job that I had to maintain, or some kind of income that I had to, or family that relied upon me to maintain. I had a bit of freedom as a young adult to, if you're going to make this leap, do it now. You have a bit less of a risk. There's still plenty of financial risk. There was a ton of, I didn't know what the hell I was doing, but I was willing to go for it, willing to make that leap of faith. And also from my lifting and maybe again narcissism, I felt that whatever hardships or adversity would arrive through the process of starting a business and owning the gym, that I would be able to fend off the adversity with my back against the wall, scrape through, and make it happen.
Mm. Do you think when you started the gym, you were aware that this was likely going to be a stepping stone for you to future endeavors, or were you kind of going into it with I tend to go into things with, this is it for me. I'm doing this for the rest of my life. And obviously, I've had hundreds of iterations of that. When I was in 7th grade and I learned how to solve a Rubik's Cube, I was like, I'm breaking the world record. This is it. This is my life.
You still know how to do it?
I can do a Rubik's Cube. It's just not that fast.
I learned it in 5th grade, and yeah, I can still do it like on cue. And I find that the moment I actually concentrate and focus on the moves I'm doing, I like forget. But if I just let my muscle memory go, I just go.
Yeah.
But yeah, side note on that. But to answer your question,
to add to that,
yeah, go ahead.
I had somebody have a Rubik's Cube, like, can you solve it? And I have it right here. Like this, I'm sure you have these, like the speed cubes, right? They had a regular one, and it was so hard to turn. And those last couple algorithms, because I have to do it fast, I can't not do it fast.
Yeah,
I was having a lot of trouble remembering actually.
That's
how
what I'm
to
talking
do it.
about. Yeah, I have some Japanese one I again bought when I was like 12 and learned, and it's real slick and works well. But anyway, to answer your question, I actually think it's a bit of neither. So it's not like I thought that this was going to be my forever thing, but but I also didn't think it was going to be like a leaping stone towards something else. I didn't think it was going to be leveraged towards some future in Denver. I had no kind of plans for that, and I definitely recognize it now, but I think I started to recognize a little bit then, is that I don't think so. I have vague 3, 5, 10-year plans, but they're more like something to glance at and not even really reference, because I think I personally, and it sounds like you're this way too, I have so many interests. Life moves and changes so fast, just in general, and let alone when you are younger, that I don't feel like I need to dig my heels into anything permanently, but just make the right decision that is, again, reasonable and a rational decision for the current future. So for the next few years, for the current moment, and that's not going to have negative consequences down the line. So I don't know if that answers it too much, but more so, I just started the gym and I thought, hey, this is something I really want to do right now. And if the time comes where I want to move beyond it, I'll address that then. Because again, opening the gym, I had no clue. It's not that I never was going to sell it, but I didn't have a plan for selling it. I didn't have a clue about that. I didn't even really have too much of a plan on expansion or anything like that. I was like, just let's get this off the ground. Let's actually have some success and see what it's like to own and have a successful business that actually functions and profits and does all that. But I never would have guessed, like, 2 years after signing the lease, that I'd already be in Colorado and have sold it.
Mm. Yeah, I think that is a characteristic of highly successful people. I'm the same way. Not to call myself highly successful, but
Not yet.
I
Or
don't
maybe
ever
already
have
yet.
a specific goal. Like, I've set goals and I've achieved them, but it was just always the next best thing. Like, that sounds fun. Okay, let's do it. Work at it for a little while. And there's this idea that I've been playing around with yet. I don't know if I quite have the language to put it into words yet, but I feel like the path of life exists between like these two extreme ends. Like, whatever you want, it could literally be any opposite virtue and vice, like extreme pain, extreme pleasure or joy or whatever, right? And I think that part of navigating that is staying involved in the uncertainties of life. And so, because you never know what's going to happen, and like, you might just up and move to Colorado because you're young and that's the next best thing to do. It would be silly for us to anticipate and plan step by step what we're going to be trying to accomplish over the next year, 3 years, 5 years, 10 years. Instead, it's a good idea to follow your intuition and gut and think, okay, what's something that maybe I would like to accomplish, and what do I need to do to stay involved with that as things come up? So it sounds like you do that with your gym. Like, this sounds fun. So it sounds like something I could do. Not quite sure what it looks like yet, but I'll handle these things as they come up.
Yeah, if I'm to make it into some analogy, I almost think it's like if you're, leading a sailboat. It's, you don't control the wind, you don't control the waves. So a lot of this is going to be unpredictable and uncertain, as you referenced, but you are still having some intentionality behind the direction that you're guiding the ship. You do have control under some factors, and you can take the winds as they come, push back, or manipulate. Your path as much as you can. You do have a compass, right? You got those goals in mind, but you don't always know if something's going to be in the way, or what you're even headed towards. Sometimes, it might be a little island, maybe it's a lot more permanent. So maybe that's a loose analogy we can kind of think about. But yeah, it's focusing on the now and like the immediate that has a bit more certainty to it, but not stressing too much about 5-10 years from now, because things change so rapidly that it's a little bit arrogant or foolish to assume anything like that.
Mhm. If you could sum up that time of your life owning the gym until, one challenge or lesson that you took away from it and maybe apply now, what would that be?
It would probably be just the assurance that I can do wild, audacious things, because I look back and I'm like, holy shit, I, you know, signed this lease at 19 years old and renovated this gym with, close friends and eventual wife, and like built this gym. And I look back at it and it almost feels like a different lifetime. It feels like a different person than who I am. Obviously, it led to who I am today, and the actions and behaviors I have and all these other things. But I tell my wife this a lot. When I look at the content that I filmed on the vlogs we shot or the photos, and whenever I throw up throwbacks on my own Instagram, it feels the equivalent of me looking at, let's say, your content, or looking at someone else on Instagram content. It almost feels like I'm looking at a different person.
Mhm.
But when I do reflect and recognize, obviously, that was me for a time period and not too long ago, it gives me a lot more reassurance that when I want to start switch back, when I want to do a 100-mile race, whatever it is, that it's like, okay, you've done very difficult things that most people would doubt before, and this is no different.
Mhm. Have you ever looked into any literature on like the importance of the masculine rite of passage or the initiation?
No, I haven't read any about that.
I'm just curious because I feel like it sounds like it's something like that for you, where it was this definitive moment where you went almost from boy to man, and now
Yeah.
you like you became who you are now through that process in looking back, you see a direct difference between the person you were before and the person you were after?
Yeah, it was like an unintentional consequence is what
Mm.
happened where it wasn't, I would say, like a rite of passage, but it is something that is definitively uh, a turning point in my life. Like opening the gym was momentous for me, and the not just taking the taking the chance and going for it, but it actually turning out well. Uh, Again, I like my wife's stepdad told me a couple weeks ago, we were in town. He was like, I didn't think the gym was going to work out. I thought it was a dumb idea. And it's just one of those things where it's like I don't know. It's like it could have easily not panned out. And I think it's easy too to reflect on it, and or for people from the outside to say, "Oh, of course it worked out because this or that." But it's easy to do retroactively, or retrospectively, because in the moment, it could have easily gone awry. We could have, after we spent all the money and opened the doors, like no one could have showed up, or we could have made all these mistakes that cost us a ton of money. And yeah, to put like a bow on it. Yeah, it was a massive turning point in my life, and I think whether it like pops up in my mind every time I make some kind of bold decision nowadays, I think it's become like sewn into me mentally and into like my spirit of how I approach things now.
Mhm. Let's talk about ultra running. Tell me a little bit about your, uncovering of this world of running farther than a marathon distance, and why you became interested in it.
Yeah, it's just one of those crazy sports that I didn't even know existed. Like most people, I stumbled upon clips or podcasts of Cam Hanes or David Goggins or Courtney Dauwalter, and I was like, wait a minute, like people actually, like the human body can run 100 miles. I didn't know that was possible, or at least I didn't know that it was such a, and that's still not common thing, but there's a few hundred people that do these races on almost like every weekend. So it is like a little pocket of the world that is this insane population. But it was never like a particular target for me. I just started running around the pandemic as a way to just kind of bolster my cardio a little bit. I always felt like running was harder than the Stairmaster or the treadmill for me, like walking on the treadmill that I would do for bodybuilding. And once gyms were closed and before I was able to open my own, I started running, got more into it, saw that there were jacked people also doing it. And I was like, okay, so I won't just melt my muscle away. And decided, okay, I'm going to try and do a marathon. Like that sounds kind of crazy to me at the time. I was like, let me do a marathon. Ran 2 marathons, and I quickly was like, all right, well, what's next? And the 100 miles was always in the back of my mind. It's a solid, clean number. It's really pretty. It sounds really difficult, and it is really difficult. And I think I'm just drawn to it for that primarily, was the idea of like, this is a very, very challenging, especially mentally, sport that obviously requires a ton of physical fitness, but there's this element of grit and doggedness that other sports don't necessarily have. Like you might have to grind through some reps. You still certainly have to grind and grit your way through training in a variety of sports, but there's few sports, if any, that have you running and moving your body through the mountains for 20 plus hours. Uh, it's it's very unique in that way, and so I was drawn to it for that. I felt like my strength background and my mental fortitude could make up for any physical conditioning I didn't have or don't have. And so I've done 350 miles at this point, 250 Ks, and it's been fascinating how it's changed my body, how it's changed me mentally, how, again, kind of like the gym reference, it's really bolstered my self-belief and knowing, okay, I've been broken mentally and physically and found a way to like find this other gear. I can do that again. Like it's kind of to use like a more pop culture term. I found out I had that dog in me, So it's learning how to pull out that dog and rowel it up sometimes when need be. So that's long version of how I got into ultra running.
Yeah, so very similar story. I think a lot of people have that story. The first thing that I ever saw, I was 19, I was in college, my first semester, and I watched Where Dreams Go to Die, which is Gary
Hmm.
Robbins' Barkley Marathon.
Hmm.
I think it was the second year he did.
Yeah,
And
I
I
think
was
the
like,
Barkley start today actually or
yeah,
tomorrow
they do. Or yeah, tomorrow, I think.
sometime.
Either way, I was like, people run 100 miles, and that race obviously is a little bit different, but you
Yeah.
know, that got me into the void that is ultra marathon documentaries on YouTube. And
Hmm.
I sort of set the same goal for myself. What we were describing earlier with your gym sort of showing you that you're capable, it served that same purpose for me. I did my first 50 miler when I was 19, and then I did 100 September of 2022, so like a year and a half ago. And you haven't done 100 yet, have you?
This summer.
Cool.
Got a
That's
big
the
one
one,
in
dude.
June. Yeah.
Like the 50 Ks I did and the 50 milers I did were great, and they were hard and they pushed me. But the 100 miler, it is what you think it is. And you will, it is a lot. I don't know. There's something about not being able to finish a 100 miler in one day that makes it so
Hmm.
moving. And you go through a very transformative thing when you get to experience the full 100.
Hmm.
But either way, have you ever read Ego is the Enemy by Ryan Holiday?
No.
That's another one I would recommend. It's a great read, but he defines ego as an unhealthy belief in one's own importance. And one of the principles in the book is you need to regularly remind yourself of your own unimportance. And I feel like for me, and it sounds like for you, ultra marathoning is that it's like in a weird way by showing like, oh, I'm not as good as I think I am. You get this immense self-confidence from it in the form of getting that dog in you.
Yeah. Yeah, it's definitely a humbling experience, and it breaks me down. I think for me, because it's funny, I've talked to some ultra runners, and I think for me, it does running overall, just as a sport or an activity, does a lot for me mentally as a place of solitude, a place of kind of losing yourself in the tedium of it. With like lifting, you can pull out your phone and there's rest periods versus running. It's step, 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 and your phones. You can pull your phone out briefly, but you're not obviously on it continuously at all. And it's kind of this place of solitude. But then there's other people that don't like they don't do it at all for the mental or emotional benefits of it. I think for me, ultra running does more of the reinforcement of what I'm capable of and challenging myself rather than the ego crusher. Because I think I've done a good job, at least definitely in recent years, of not having an ego and doing a lot of acknowledgement of my own ignorance. And perhaps reading has done a lot of that load as well as far as pushing me down that way. But yeah, it's either way, it's a transformative experience, like you said.
Mm. That role of giving you space essentially to think and ponder, has it always been like that? Or is that something that developed over time as you ran more?
Like, was running always that for me?
Mm-hmm.
I think it was once I stopped wearing headphones, which I still wear for like long runs. But I think when I got more into the sport and then started to go on a few runs without a podcast or music in my head, it was just me and either cars passing by or birds tweeting. Uh, I think I like unlocked that side of it.
Mm. Is there a reason? Just talking to you, it sounds like running and fitness is sort of this. If somebody looked at your Instagram, they would be like, this is a running and fitness guy. But it seems like that it's almost a side thing for you that just so happens to be, it's just a means of self exploration, perhaps a time and space to think about the books that you consume or making a business decision, etc. Is that really the main reason why you continue to pursue it? Or is there
Yeah,
something else there?
no, I think that's a really um, correct judgment that you've kind of noticed and insight that you've made about my account and just identity itself is for a while running or lifting, I should say, was like that was the thing I looked forward to every day. Like that was, my best time of the day. That was where a lot of my energy was focused around. And running kind of formed into that as well. Owning the gym too. It was still very much my life was centered around fitness overall. At this point, I almost feel like it's become very banal for me. Just like looking at fitness content, making fitness content, it's become very fatiguing for me, at least creatively. And not always. And obviously, I still continue to do it for both personal reasons, lucrative reasons, all kinds of things. But uh, I think after almost a decade in the fitness realm, it's become so second nature for me. And I don't mean it in some arrogant way, but it really just has become so just second nature as far as brushing my teeth, lifting or running. It's so ingrained in me that it doesn't feel like a hobby or passion, but just part of what I do.
Mm.
If that makes sense. So yes, like other things have they've moved up the ladder, so to speak, as far as what brings me passion, what excites me. And again, training for a race brings some excitement. When I set specific goals, it brings me excitement. But like at this point in my life, uh, books or even, thinking about specialty coffee, like these like other passions and pursuits of mine are a lot more enriching at this point than fitness. Fitness is I'll never not do it. It is like I said, ingrained in me. It has become part of me, but it's kind of been so interwoven into my routine that it's not the crown jewel anymore, I guess, in my
Mm.
life.
I think I have language for this. And I was actually talking to a training client of mine yesterday about this. She is a Pilates instructor and has come to me recently to learn, not only get some strength and conditioning work in herself, but to learn a little bit more about it. And I think, because I feel very similar. If somebody comes to me and wants to get in better shape, that's easy. Like we just have to do these things. And I hesitate to use the word elementary because there are people out there who really struggle with their weight and staying in shape. And this causes lots of stress and turmoil in their life. But I'm beginning to view fitness as an elementary thing that is just everybody should do it. And
Mhm.
it's pretty simple. And you just need to establish a routine around it in your life. And what it does is if once you nail that down, then you can focus on stuff that's actually important. And I feel that way
Yeah.
because I've been doing the show more. Like you're episode 51. So next episode after you is a year. We've been doing the show for a year. And I've been having conversations with guests, researchers. I'm having more conversations that I want to have on the show about things that I find to be more important, which is like not being addicted to social media and the how stress affects you in your life long term and your health outcomes, and talking to you about what running ultra marathons and exploring yourself means to you. I just feel like this is another tier of existence that you can access when fitness is good and your health is good. And it seems silly to me that, again, I don't want to discount anybody's problems, but it seems silly to me that people don't realize how important it is to just get it where you don't have to direct an immense amount of your energy every single day to trying to maintain your health and fitness. It needs to be something that you don't even think about so that you can worry about everything else.
Yeah, it's really quite simple, but it's not easy. And I think that's what you're hitting on is that like fitness is very simple and straightforward. Like how to lose weight, how to build muscle. It doesn't have to be very fancy. It is very straightforward. And it's not easy, but it's not insanely hard either. The only caveat I'd say to my statements and yours, I would say if you have a goal to be elite in something, or if you obviously are having that spike of passion for powerlifting, Olympic lifting, cycling, whatever it is, then yes, then that might kind of shift you towards uh, going a little bit more deep and extensive with that field. But yes, if your goals are just general maintenance, enjoyment of it, still making progress, but it's just not the center of your life anymore, or just in general, then it is quite, like you said, like elementary and basic.
Mm. Yeah. And I think just to add one more layer to that, I think most people would strive to accomplish what you just mentioned, which is this very moderate approach to everything where you're sort of focus is getting your life to a state of moderation, both in health and family and interests. And I would say that the percentage of people that would like to accomplish performance related things, whether it's powerlifting or weightlifting or running, like you mentioned, is a very small percentage of people. And I actually think that because of the fitness industry, this might be a whole rabbit hole we go down to. We don't have to talk about it too much. Because of the fitness industry, people are starting to mistake. They think they want to accomplish these high performance goals, but I don't know if that's really true.
Yeah, no, that's 100%. I see it with running lately, just because that's the following in the space I've been in more lately. But to give an example, people set this sub 3 hour marathon goal because it's pretty, it sounds cool. They see their favorite influencers doing it. And to make another example, we could say there's a certain powerlifting total, or getting your IFBB Pro card in bodybuilding, whatever it is. There's some relatively arbitrary goal that they want to reach, and they don't know why they want to reach it, but just like it it almost ties back to like what we said earlier. It's like, all right, let me just reach this goal and figure out afterwards. But it's a little bit different, I think, with the business than some kind of fitness goal, although the same principles maybe apply. But yeah, they accomplished that goal. They didn't really realize like what was the why behind it, when really the why was either out of vanity, or it was out of like this temporary feeling of accomplishment. But then on the other side of that, they find it hard to get up early to train. Like if they don't have a race on the books, they don't get up and train. And I know a lot of people like that, actually, that if they don't have a competition, or they don't have even like some specific goal or pressure on them, they don't, like, fitness isn't getting done. And for me, and it sounds like for you as well, like you do it anyway. Like you don't like need a goal. The goal like will amplify the intensity you take with it, right? I'm sure you're working towards the next belt in jiu-jitsu. So that's there. But you would probably keep showing up anyway. And I think that's probably the goal you should get to, is having more of like a baseline commitment to it.
Mm. Yeah. And to come full circle with what we were talking about earlier as well, there's nothing wrong with having the performance goals. Like, I'm actively aware that the performance side of things is something that's going to happen to me. And I'm not willing to sacrifice my relationship with my fiance, family time, going out with friends occasionally, for a super high level performance goal. That being said, I have a pretty specific performance goal that I'm trying to accomplish at the end of this year. I'm going to do a 500-pound weightlifting total and a 50-mile run in the same day. And in a couple of years, I would like to do a 600-pound total and a 60-mile run in the same day. And like technically, because I made the game up, I'll be the first person that's ever done that, right?
Yeah.
And I have that set as a goal, but it's not something that I'm like, I'll for sure do the 550 because I'm at those numbers now. I don't know if I'm going to be able to do the 600-pound total and the 60-mile run on the same day. It's just those are where my interests lie, and it's something that I think I can do, and I would like to see what I'm capable of. And it's not so that I can make a vlog and say that I'm the first person to do this ever. It's because I think that's where my limitations are going to end, and I would like to see for myself. I think it would be a mistake not to feel called to do that and then not pursue it.
And maybe like the last note on this, I'd say, if you don't mind me jumping on it, was I think the important takeaway too, and maybe social media is the facade that perpetuates this, is we don't all need to be elite athletes, and we don't all need to be optimizers of every facet of our lives. We don't need to all be on a million different supplements and cold plunge and sauna and red light and mouth tape and all this shit. So it's okay to just enjoy fitness for what it is and not make it anything more.
Yeah, I think Alex Hormozy has the quote of something like, America was built on the backs of men that smoked cigarettes and ate sandwiches for lunch, and like we're going to be fine. You don't have to, if you miss your cold plunge in the morning, you're going to be fine. Talk to me a little bit about literature. I understand this is sort of a relatively newer consistent habit that you've gotten into over the last year or two, maybe. Tell me a little bit about that. What's the origin of you focusing so heavily on being able to read consistently?
Yeah, so I'll expand it further than just literature, because a lot of it has been rooted in philosophy. But yeah, I have no shame in admitting I've only really been reading seriously for I think like 20 months at this point. It's a little bit of like a year and a half. It's basically as soon as we moved out here, I was able to reformulate my routines and embed reading into it because I'm a very habitual creature.
The mountains will
Um,
do that to you.
they will. And so yeah, I mean, most of my life, I didn't read books like really at all. I mean, I loved the Percy Jackson series as a kid. I read some things here or there, but I mean, I was the student who would skip the reading, read the Spark Notes, take the quiz or test, still get an A or B, and move on. It's not that I discounted the value of books. I hadn't found a book that really gripped me. I wasn't really interested. I wasn't surrounded by books, I think, growing up too, which is something that I really want to change for my children. Um, and yeah, I mean, as I got older into college and started opening the gym and all that, I would try and read some more self-help or business books because I was trying to kind of approach in the way that I think most people mistakenly do is let me find the bite-size advice or the few tips in this business book, these 48 laws of power. How can I get these and be able to kind of manipulate relationships or make more money or, thrive in business, right? And I looked at it as, again, some kind of financial means or, I don't know, way of like self-improvement and in an external way. And I would read here or there. I got some on my shelf. But again, I got into more what I would call like serious reading, classical literature, even more modern literature as well, and philosophy once I moved. Most of it started with a love for philosophy. I had read like bits of Plato's Republic when I was like 18. I was working at this gym and someone left it behind. And I, out of curiosity, read a few pages. I was like, oh, I can actually understand this. It's not too crazy. And read through it, actually bought my own copy, read through it a little bit in 2020, but it wasn't hooked at all. Um, but philosophy has this air and of this, pomposity and like of you feel like if you read these books, you'll appear erudite, you'll appear intelligent, and cool old guys in tunics with
Mm.
beards, and you're like, okay, let me read that stuff. So
It's
kind of
like the
like getting,
wizard archetype. It's like I
yeah,
want to become the wizard. Yeah.
yeah, kind of getting into lifting for like wanting attention from girls. You get into like philosophy for wanting to seem, or not even just seem, but be intelligent.
Mm.
And so, like, honestly, I probably got into it for a lot of that reason. Started with a book that many people love and praise, and for good reason, Meditations, and then from there fell into Nietzsche rabbit hole, and then kind of really started in a more chronological order. Worked my way up since there. And then really got into literature, I'd say like about a year ago. So it's kind of like led with philosophy, then got into literature. Now it's a good balance of both. Um, but to kind of succinctly put it, I got into reading and read today just from, again, that place that we started this podcast from, a place of self-discovery, of curiosity, of absorbing as many different perspectives and ideas as possible, and being able to properly formulate my own philosophy of life and my own view on things, my own perspective on ethics, think more rationally. And I feel like philosophy is very much that tool for doing so. It's not just a bunch of old men pontificating about abstract ideas that have no practical value. It is, I think, philosophy, especially if you read existentialism, is a tool of assessing your own anxiety, of understanding your own psychology, of breaking yourself down and um, kind of taking a look under the hood in a lot of ways. And it also is useful for understanding society and political systems better, understanding that, oh, we've kind of had good life principles for 3,000 years, and the principles haven't changed, and most of society still doesn't follow them. So you realize that a lot of things are reinventing the wheel. And literature for so long, I thought wasn't as edifying. I thought it was just pure entertainment. I thought it was, enjoyable and you can get something out of it. But I didn't see it as very instructional until I started to read it, and I realized how much you can derive from character interactions, plots, philosophical concepts, and ideological concepts that are interwoven within the novel. Um, how much bliss and joy and comfort you can get from the words of Kafka or Sylvia Plath or whomever, and been hooked ever since.
Something that it's kind of crazy how you and I have kind of gone through the same iteration of thinking and acting in our own personal lives, because almost on the same exact time frame, I've been a reader on and off my whole life. Read Aragon in middle school, read the Harry Potter books. I did actually do the readings that they assigned us when we were going through school. But about the last year, a little bit more than a year, I've read pretty much every day. I can probably count on like one or two hands the amount of days that I've missed in the last year. And similarly, like I'm exploring tons of different things. I do have an interest in philosophy, but I've read tons of fiction books and fantasy books. And something that I've got drawn into since starting my podcast is this idea that we all suck really bad at talking. Like the language use of the modern man is very, very poor quality. See, I'm struggling to come up with words now, right? And something that I've found immense help from reading is that I'm getting access to a level of language that I'm not used to hearing and seeing and feeling on a day-to-day basis. And it's really helping me articulate better, not just on the podcast where people can hear me talk, but in regular life too. And just like subtle nuanced differences of using the word glamorous instead of the word beautiful, like that little difference between the true definition of what each one of those things means has been very helpful in terms of getting my ideas out and articulating to other people, but also with myself. And I'm seeing a lot of the same things that you described, which is that I'm 23. My version of the world and the political structure of the society that I was born into is very limited, but I'm finding as my language use improves and the content that I consume increases, especially around philosophy and other historical things, I'm getting a much clearer picture as to the state of the world, what it is that we're struggling with, potentially some of the reasons behind why we're in the state that we're in. You and I seem to have equal frustrations with the fitness content industry as it is right now. I now am having the words to use to explain why that is. And I think that not enough people recognize that by scrolling on social media. I just did an episode with a guy on social media addiction, and only being able to focus for 15-second clips and not being exposed to any sort of deep literature or complex language. We're very limited in not just the way that we can communicate, but the way we think. And I think that is a big problem. And it's something that I'm still trying to work at improving myself.
Yeah, 100%. I've always thought of it as self-censorship in a way, and I've made a few videos on this uh, philosophy YouTube channel or literature YouTube channel I have as well. I don't push too hard, but I I've thought about this a lot, and I couldn't agree more. I think our lack of vocabulary is making us as a society very dumb. We use, like you said, a very small set of words and our word choice. And not only is it limiting as far as how we can um, understand and assess our own feelings, emotions, experiences, but it deeply limits how we can articulate ourselves, how we are as a rhetorician, how we are in speaking and explaining ourselves. And the problem is when you don't have a larger vocabulary to draw from, you lack clarity, you lack intentionality, you lack the precision that a more complex word or a more specific word may provide to somebody. Like you mentioned, the difference between good versus beautiful versus glamorous, versus whatever it could be, right? It's very, very different. And so I've actually, a part of this is through my uh, the fact that I've been enamored with David Foster Wallace, who is also very much a grammar and literary Nazi. But I've fallen. I have a physical dictionary. I refer to it often. I kind of have like developed a journal of anytime I come across a new word I haven't learned, or even sometimes it's words that I use and think I know what they mean, but then I realize I don't. And either they don't mean exactly what I thought, or they might mean something completely different. I'm using it, in the wrong context. I write it down in the journal. I write out the definition, and I've been able to, not easily and not too broadly, but I've been able to slowly improve myself as a speaker, and expand the word choice that I can lean
Mm.
on.
I'm going to take that from you. I do that with when I read. You know what? Sometimes I think most people when they read, there's a word that they don't know and they don't recognize, but you can kind of infer what it's
Context
referring
clue it,
to
yeah.
based off of the context around it. I used to be like that where I would just skip over it, and now I force myself to look up the definition and, think on it for a few moments before I continue. And I think writing it down will definitely improve the retention of those words a lot. And I even actually have, like, last week, one of my goals was I wanted to use the word toil more frequently in life, because I felt like that's one of those words that you can use, um,
Hmm.
especially in like a fitness context. But I sort of set these goals of like, okay, we're going to use this in this word this week. And I have found, like you said, it doesn't seem like it makes a big difference. But after you've been doing this for a year or two, you really start to realize you've come a long way. And I
Uh,
imagine 10 years from now, I'm going to look back on this conversation and be kind of embarrassed at the way that I was speaking. But that's part of it. Like you have to be bad at something, and you have to be aware of it to be able to improve upon it. And it's cool that you have such an emphasis on it. It's clear just talking with you that it's something that you are skilled at. And I'm sure you probably feel like at some level you have to improve a little bit more on your own. But yeah, I do appreciate that. It's been a lot.
mhm.
Something that I'm curious about asking is, we've talked a lot about, starting a gym, running ultra marathons, literature. You've spoken on the fact that a lot of these things are serving the same purpose, which is improving oneself. I'm curious as to the why behind that. Why do you think it's so important to improve yourself?
Well, first, I'd say that I don't think everything I do goes towards improving myself, but more so exploring and out of like curiosity. So, like a lot of those end up overlapping into improving the self, right? Like if you explore more, you learn more, and you are able to make better decisions or have a better perspective, be more enlightened, and feel like you're living a more fulfilling life. Um, but at least I'd say that's not always like at the forefront of the decision making. But why it's important to improve yourself, I just think life is essentially all about becoming. And I think we often are worried about peaking, whether it's like, you know, we kind of think of ourselves almost like corporations on the stock market where every quarter there has to show improvement. Every quarter there has to be some financial growth so that we feel good about ourselves. People can get their bonuses and buy the next yacht. But life doesn't obviously work that way, and I think fixating it too much around external factors such as your financial being in the house you live in, maybe your romantic relationships, um, those can be transient and they can change at a moment's notice in your life. So I think if you approach self improvement in the right way, it goes far beyond the physical and far beyond the external, and it goes towards uh, your emotional intelligence and your self awareness and improving how you speak, how you think, how you perceive things, your behaviors, your habits that are more easily maintained, I would say, and something that isn't dependent upon, let's say, your youth or something like that. Like we might talk about how important self improvement and fitness is, but at some point, in your 50s, 60s, you're likely going to decline fitness wise. But there's still plenty of ways that you can improve, level up, gain new skills, new habits, improve again your worldview. Uh, and so that's I guess what I come down to as far as if I'm gonna try and define the bucket and the umbrella that is self improvement and why I pursue it.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, I think this is sort of connected. It just what you said prompted me to think of this, is a realization that I've come to recently, is that the world that you and I have inherited is coming off of the back of we're coming off of the back of hustle culture right now. And I think a lot of people are either still in that mode or very heavily pushing against it. Lots of dialogue right now is centered around the idea of moderation and finding a balance and seeking this peace that we've sort of been speaking around the entire time we've had this conversation. And I think one of the key pieces to it is many people, when they think of self-improvement, they think of the idea of optimizing their lives to work. And I don't know if that's right. And maybe an easier way to explain it is people think I'm going to rest or sleep right now so that I can work more or more efficiently, etc. Where the twist to that is I think we should actually be optimizing our life for rest, because those moments of leisure, right? I'm alluding to the path that I was talking about earlier. The beautiful moments in life happen on the interplay between working and resting. And if you've been completely bogged down and you've been spending months toiling at whatever task or thing or goal that you're trying to accomplish, and you come out the other side of it, that equal amount of time that you spend in this leisure or pondering or thinking about what this experience meant to you, those things interplaying back and forth infinitely within your life and the lives of others are really, it's really that's what self-improvement is. We need to find this. When people say balance, it doesn't necessarily mean, in my opinion, how you feel day to day. Like, are you stressed out, or, we need to come down from that stress, or have you been spending too much time in leisure? Okay, you need to work a little bit more. It's not that. It's that to walk the path that is improving oneself and growing the self or the soul, or however you want to define those terms. It's if you can zoom out big picture over all of the things that you've accomplished, in your case, opening the gym, you can probably pinpoint each one of the races that you've trained for and done as meaning something for you or teaching you a certain valuable lesson. All of those things came to you because it was action and toil and work, plus all of the time you spent outside and away from that. And when you do this over and over and over again over the course of your life, what you get is likely an upward trajectory of self-improvement or self-mastery. And I think that's what most people are viewing as you described earlier when we were talking about reading and becoming the wizard, as what we're trying to achieve. And I think most people just don't recognize that the way to that is to take a deep breath, relax a little bit, and understand that this is something that you're going to have to continue to repeat over the course of your life. And it doesn't matter if it's an ultramarathon or a business or committing yourself to reading. It's all of those things all at once, and you just have to keep going with it.
Yeah, I think it's acknowledging that success and happiness are not end goals. Self-improvement is not an end goal. Um, and also that self-improvement should be, at least at its crux, the pursuit of intangible rewards. So as you referenced earlier, a lot of people look at self-improvement as a avenue for optimizing themselves so that they can be more productive, work harder, get more work done, work faster. There's a big push even in like the literary side of YouTube of reading faster, of reading, like pushing the quantity or like those vanity metrics more than what you can actually derive from the book. And I think that's actually one big critique I have of Broicism is the guys that push these Stoic principles heavily, but aren't Stoics in the slightest. So what I mean is they'll take the principle and pillar of Stoicism of discipline, but they're using that as a means towards greater success or more vanity as far as their physique, right? It's used heavily in fitness. And it's like, okay, how can I use these Stoic principles to grow my business or to get more attention from girls or to be more successful or more wealthy? And it's like, well, you clearly have not read much Stoicism because it's vastly centered around moderation, not externals at all. And so I, I don't know if there's a way out of it. I don't know if this push for productivity is waning at all. I think if anything, it's continuing to grow. Maybe not at the same exponential pace, but I just see the accounts, the individuals that get the most push are still they throw out the facade that it's all about balance, and that and they use these like buzzwords like balance and there's plenty out there, but balance is like an easy one. But then they'll put behind it their program or their course or their ambassador code, and it just feels very uh, disingenuous. It feels very deceptive, and I think these. I don't like it. I'll leave it at that. I don't like it.
You said at the beginning of that, you said self-improvement, happiness, success, these are not the end goals. What do you think the end goal is then?
I don't view, at least at this point in my life, I don't view life as an end goal, or like I don't assign a telos to life. I just think it's a constant state of becoming, never being. So what that means is, you're never the same person, for better or for worse. You're constantly these different gradations of yourself day after day after day. It's what I referenced earlier, that myself 2 years ago owning the gym, I don't know that guy. Like, obviously the choices I made have consequences and have, I am the byproduct of that individual. But me at 16 years old, me at 12, me at 20, me 2 years ago, these are all like different people who have different views, perspectives, likes and dislikes. And I just throw out the window any
Expectation?
yeah, expectation might be the word. I throw out the window any kind of expectation of, or even like desire too much of any kind of like, I don't know, just to use the same word, like end goal. Like I obviously want to be happy, but I don't put too much value or emphasis on happiness, because I know it can be stripped from me at any moment. That as soon as I reach X financial position, as soon as I buy this house, as soon as I have whatever, it's always going to be reset. That hedonic treadmill becomes stabilized. You reach this homeostasis, and now you have to get even higher to elicit that same happiness response. So I really try my best to still pursue, as we talked about, I'm still pursuing. I think that's the crux of life, is pursuing self-improvement and becoming and all of that. So it's not that I don't have goals. I clearly do. I think goals are important. I just don't put too much of an emphasis on them in the way that I think some people do, for the reasons that we already spoke about, how on the other side of that door of reaching that goal, it's empty. And you have to create and envisage or imagine like another door, that's in the distance that you have to work towards. So it just becomes this cycle.
It's the action, it's the living, it's the getting through it, that sort of thing.
Yeah, it's I don't know if Gage talked about it a lot. Have you read Camus?
No, I haven't.
I would recommend it. I recommend. I think the Strangers is a popular book, but I didn't love it. I think a lot of people don't love it. I would read The Myth of Sisyphus, but it's that Sisyphean pursuit. It is the acknowledgement of the absurd, that we are here on this earth. Even if there is a purpose, there's likely not a way that we can understand it or acknowledge it, as far as our physical being and our presence, our limitations as human beings. So we live in this like absurd world where we're like constantly pursuing these things that are temporary, often don't matter. But I find joy and value in the pursuit itself, and it's like a trite thing to say, love the journey, not the destination. Right. But I think life is a continual journey that abruptly ends at some point in your life. And I think you still can find value, enjoyment, happiness in pursuing, different objectives along the way. And I do that. And I think that's extremely fulfilling and important in people's lives. But I don't get too fixated on it, I guess.
Well, Well, dude, I don't want to take up too much more of your time. I probably could talk to you about stuff like this for hours, but let's put a ribbon on it. Is there anything else that you would like to add before we head out?
I think that's it.
All right. Real quick though, where can people find more from you? Follow along with your journey, ultramarathoning. Also mention I know you said you have like a philosophy literature channel.
Yeah, I'll throw
I'm
it out there.
interested in checking that out, and I'd like to add that to the description as well.
Yeah, so you can find me. Luckily, I snagged the names early in my life at Brock Covington. No dots or underscores, any of that on Instagram. If you just Google me, you can find most of everything about me. You'll find my YouTube channel, which has my currently kind of dormant podcast. I've taken a little bit of a break hiatus. But the Zero Quit podcast has, I believe, like 70-ish episodes on there as well if you want to hear more of me rambling on with some great guests. I also, like you mentioned, have this. It's not really secretive. I like to grow it separately from my Instagram just because people assign so much of a fitness personality and identity to me. But the YouTube channel, if you look up The Active Mind on YouTube, it'll come up. And that's it's like my quiet, cozy corner of the internet that I can speak about books, share philosophical lessons I've learned, discuss, certain philosophers or thinkers that I think are very interesting, whether it is Camus, existentialist, Schopenhauer. I have like a 5-episode series on Nietzsche and his like books I did in November. So check that out if you're into philosophy or literature at all. I think you'll find it to be a comforting place. Yeah, those are probably the best places to find me.
Right on. I'll be sure to put that all in the show notes below. But dude, I appreciate you. Good luck with your 100-miler this summer. I'm excited to see how that goes for you. But yeah, we'll leave it right there.
Yeah, I appreciate it. I enjoyed you having me on, and we'll have to stay connected for sure.
Thank you guys so much for listening to this week's episode of Good People. If you enjoyed my conversation with Brock, head on down to the show notes below and you can find him at the links I've provided there. If you are listening on YouTube, please like, comment, and subscribe, and make sure you turn on our notifications so you don't miss our weekly episodes. If while you were listening, you enjoyed, please share this episode with someone you love, perhaps your grandma. We'll see you next time.